Baroda and Navaratna University, playing a key role in advisory to GPCB and Vadodara Municipal Corporation on issues like river situation and waste management. Neha Sarwat is also known for her research in river systems, urban sprawls, gender inclusive designs, and ecological planning. She coordinates with the VMC as a Vishwamitra River Group, and she is a core contributor to policy dialogues and sustainable urban features. And Neha, you are welcome. Please start. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank GES to give me this opportunity to speak at this platform today. It's the World Environmental Day, and we celebrate this so that we do raise certain awareness within ourselves to take initiatives either individually or collectively to safeguard and protect our environment. I'd like, for today's presentation, I'd not want it to be an academic monologue. I'd like it to be a dialogue if possible. I know on an online platform like this, dialogue is a little difficult and challenging, but so is environment. The topic of environment is equally challenging. So I do encourage a lot of today's guests to question, to participate, to deliberate and dialogue. So before I start, I just like to, lay these, set the context of today's dialogue. It is, we all know what the environment has gone through and is going through. We know what environment is, and all of us know about climate change and climate crisis. But to set the context of today's talk, I'd like to, as a planner, because all of us are part of settlements and habitats, we as animals, as prime animals, we are a part of habitat, and we also have our processes and functions. How they intervene with the natural environment is what we want to talk about, and what is the give and take, the back and forth iterative process. And I think that is what needs more deliberation in today's time and context. So with that, I'd like to, it's not going, the slides are not changing. Yeah, okay. So as children, we have this very nice perception. If somebody asks you draw a city, then we have this kind of an image. We draw buildings, we draw roads, we draw cars, we draw planes, and that is because these are our aspirations. And if you're asked to draw a rural setting, a village setting, then you bring in nature. As children, we are, it's an inbuilt characteristic. So today's discussion is this whole dilemma between what is urban and what is rural, what is development and what is environment. And all these four terms are very closely related and interrelated with each other. And that is the perspective that I want to set today. That is the tone of the discussion that I want to set today. And I want to leave, and I want the participants to leave with this kind of thinking as to what are we doing individually and what can we do collectively. How are we contributing towards the crisis situation that has arisen with respect to the environment, and what can we do? So with this very nice image, I'd like to, just get into a little bit of technicality over here. How is a rural defined, peri-urban defined, and urban defined? Well, urban has been defined very well, and a sense of India and all urban theoretical discourses talk about what is urban. With a population of 5,000, density of 4,400 persons per square kilometer, and 75% male working population. I've underlined male very knowingly because our definitions are quite archaic and they need to be visited according to me. This is a time when, our definitions have been made about 70, 80 or 100 years ago, when it was assumed that only the male members of the household would be working or would be contributing in economic activities. But the scenario today has changed with two people and multi people working. Even the children who stay in the house beyond 18 years old are also working and contributing in urban areas. In rural areas, the children as young as 12 years old are also contributing in the household income. Having said that, rural is then defined as all areas that are not urban. So there is no definitive definition of rural per se. So anything that is not urban is rural. So how does that translate? A population of less than 5,000, density of less than 400, and only 25% male working population towards agricultural occupations. Now the word agricultural occupation is also very important for us to keep in mind, because that is the way our definition, then hence these kind of definitions then go on to inform our policies, our legislations, and the way the administrative sector has been set up in the governance mechanism. Now peri-urban is somewhere in the middle. It is a transition from urban to rural. There is no definition per se in terms of quantitative numbers, what should be the population and what should be the density, but it is considered an extension of urban areas. So as urban areas tend to grow or develop in our language, they tend to become peri-urban areas, and they are characterized by low density residential development or construction, farmhouses, etc. And the land use and the occupations, the infrastructure and utilities are very urban in nature. It is just a density, I think, that matters, but everything else, it has a lot of urban characteristics. This is the general perception of people in civic society, in academia and practice about what is urban, peri-urban and rural. Of course, we all know the grass is always greener on the other side, and what we don't have is something that we aspire to be without knowing the pros or cons or the benefits and policies. So the perception, general perception, this is as per research, published research that is there, urban areas look for a higher standard of living, and I want to stress the word standard of living or standard of life. Rural areas are those areas which are considered that do not have the privilege of urban. So if you do not live in urban areas for whatever reason, you are the lesser privileged. Unfortunately, we also call them backward areas, which I personally do not agree with the term backward and forward, or developed and underdeveloped. But the general perception is that rural areas are underdeveloped. And what is development? I'd like to discuss that too as well. Therefore, peri-urban, because it's a transition stage, peri-urban becomes best of both worlds. By best of both worlds, I mean urban lifestyle in a natural setting. As cities urbanize and the density increases, the demands of the population increase based on their mindset or their occupational needs. The kind of life that is there in the urban areas, the percentage of nature or the natural environment is much lesser. And in that case, it's a highly built kind of an environment. In rural areas, the natural percentage is higher, the natural environment percentage is higher, and you live in nature, and that is what is known as rural. Peri-urban will have some natural elements in terms of tree covers, in terms of water entities, in terms of rivulets or rivers in their natural state, but it is very rapidly catching up with the urban mindset. So I have consciously put up these images to kind of depict the the entire dichotomy of how we perceive urban and rural. Now that perception is also reflected in the way our policies are formulated. With respect to rural policies by the Department of Rural Development and urban policies by the Department of Urban Development and Housing. Now what is important to understand is that rural policies, they assume that the standard of living has to match up to or catch up to the urban kind of standard of living. So there's a lot of economic policies, economy based policies, employment policies, finance assistance policies, and infrastructure based policies in the in the form of Gram Sadak Yojana or your Awas Yojana and the other kind of missions that are there, which one of the most important missions that I would like to point out is Shama Prasad Mukherjee Rural Urban Mission, that looks at the balance between the natural environment and the growth or the development aspect. The other one is the Integrated Watershed Management Program, which technically has a lot of potential, but the way it has been operationalized and implemented, there are a lot of gaps. I do not want to get into the details and the nitty-gritties of these policies, but as citizens, as students, as academia, as experts, as practicing professionals, I think one needs to understand these policies because they do affect our lives at an individual level and as at a collective level. On the other hand, the urban policies do focus a lot on infrastructure in terms of water supply, sanitation, electrification, and livelihoods and housing. It also, I mean, there are a few policies like urban growth management policies that do acknowledge the need to control and contain the kind of urban development or the effect, the sprawl effect of urban development that is bringing about in today's time. One other policy in the rural areas which I've missed out and which I'd like to highlight is PURA. That's the provision of urban infrastructure in rural areas. Now, why is that important? Because of a mindset which I'm going to talk about later, but that's a very important policy, and that policy is based on a lot of these perceptions that our decision makers bring to the table. So while certain kind of basic infrastructure that is required as per the Constitution of India, we have certain rights, but we generally forget the responsibilities that we have towards our land and the environment. And that is something that I'd like to highlight over here. So we always talk about rights, and that is why we have these policies and acts and the missions and the finance schemes that we have. But at some point, there has to be a line drawn, and where that line has to be drawn is not an individual say, or should not be an individual say, but a collective decision. So when you're talking of urban and peri-urban and rural areas, it is important to understand urbanization as a process. Urbanization is converting to urban, and that's a question I'd like to put forth in this forum. Is urbanization equivalent to development, and is development equal to construction? Because we normally associate development to construction activities. It could be construction of roads, it could be construction of infrastructure, it could be construction of housing, anything. But when we talk of construction, then the unsaid or unwritten rule that comes with destruction of nature. And that is something we need to understand, that when we talk of urban, peri-urban or rural, when we talk of urbanization or development, or when we're talking of converting the rural to urban or the natural to a built environment kind of a thing, are we equating you know, development to construction activities, or should development be an overall balance between the natural and the built environment? So that is a question that all of us need to deliberate on. Another aspect is, these kind of linear infrastructure projects that cut across our rural landscapes, that cut across our periurban landscapes. Linear infrastructure in the form of railways, in the form of highways, expressways, electrical transmission and distribution layout, gas pipelines. These are just few to name. And then we have a lot of these, and I'm not getting into defense infrastructure over here. I'm only talking about civic infrastructure. Defense related infrastructure has its own kind of complexities, and I don't want to get into that. But when we talk of linear infrastructure projects, these provisions come because there is a certain demand from the people, supposedly the people. We want, faster travel speeds. We want to, we want to have access to all areas, and we have this attitude of, we need to be there. We need to be, see there. We need to get there. So that is one of the main reasons why these kind of projects do come up. Not to say that it is wrong, but somewhere, like I said, we'll have to draw a line. So the current development model that we see, because of these kind of infrastructure projects and primarily transportation related projects, which brings about greater connectivity, greater access in a more convenient and in a more comfortable manner. We're also, going towards a more homogenized society, where then everybody, we, transcend climatic zones, we transcend ecosystems, we transcend terrains, and everything has to look alike. If I'm sitting in my home, I need an air conditioner. If I go on a hill station for tourism purpose, I still need my air conditioner. So that is the kind of homogenization I'm talking about over here. In the bargain, we're also compromising our diversity, ecological diversity, social diversity, economic diversity, and cultural diversity. So our occupations are changing. Everybody wants to get into engineering. Everybody wants to get into IT. Everybody wants to get, or not everybody wants to, but there's a perception everybody needs to get into those kind of occupations if you have to so-called survive and thrive in this in the ecosystem that we have today of the current development model. What this does is this actually creates a lot of dissonance, not just socially but also naturally and ecologically. Highways of this kind that do not consider the topography, they don't consider the slopes, they don't consider the water flows, they create a lot of environmental ecological hazards or disasters, I would like to say. If you see this image over here, there's a huge retaining wall on the right on the downstream of a water flow from going from left to right. And then if there is a kind of a waterlogging situation upstream, or a drought, a water scarcity kind of situation downstream, then that will affect the kind of occupations and the land uses and the land cover that are there. And that's the first set, or the first ball that sets the entire system of change rolling. So small decisions, small interventions, but huge impacts. So when we talk of this, an impact, a cumulative impact of all the kind of urbanization that we want, this is just a graphic, a visual graphic to just see the kind of extent of urbanization we're talking about, because electrification and access to power and energy is the first sign of urbanization. So in the last and this is 2023, I'm sure it has grown more in 2025. The night snapshot or the aerial image at the night tells us what is the kind level of urbanization in rural, in natural areas, and in peri-urban areas. So in north around Delhi, the intensity has become much more. Bombay, Pune, that area, the entire conurbation between Bombay to Ahmedabad has the intensity has increased. The entire Gangetic plain, um, the level of urbanization has increased. And of course, cities like Nagpur, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai. So this image is very telling about the kind of direction, in which direction are we heading, and to what extent, because of this direction, to what extent is environment or the natural ecosystems being compromised. So now my next tema is development in environment, and they've always been considered to be at loggerheads with each other. So there's a myth that goes around, and they say if you want development, then we'll have to compromise the environment, and if you want to focus on the environment, then you cannot expect the kind of development you want to see as compared to the so-called developed cities or the developed countries. And therefore, this whole idea of what then is development and what is the environmental impacts of these kind of developmental activities that we're talking about in today's day and time. So of course we know climate crisis and we know water crisis, two of the major kind of dialogues that are occurring globally, and there have been mitigation measures taken to address urban heat island, to address floods, to address droughts, to address the depleting water tables and aquifers, to address riverine systems, to address forest systems. But at the end of the day, we do not want to or we do not tend to link it to our development models that we have, and therefore it always is perceived as development against environment and not development and environment. So this is the kind of models that we are perceiving in today's day and time. The left hand side images, these are all proposed images of how we want to see our cities, our peri-urban areas, and our rural areas. So everything has to be designed, but the design approach, planning approach is very much urban. So if you're going to bring an urban mindset to the rural and the peri-urban ecosystems, you are going to transform them into urban areas eventually. And the percentage of natural areas is decreasing by the day as we speak. Now, why are we, looking at all these things? What are the causative agents? So when we talk of causative agents, because that's a very important aspect in the way we perceive our urban, rural, and peri-urban landscapes. So the extrinsic or the external causes that I look at or I understand is the land use and land cover changes thanks to all the other, the linear infrastructure, the expansion of urban areas that brings about a lot of land use and land cover changes. It's a changing rainfall patterns due to the heat island effect, the changes in the wind pattern, the tidal activities. They are taking place at a slower pace, but it's a reality. The so-called economic challenges to agricultural practices, because our India is an agrarian community or country primarily, and a lot of our rural economy is based or was based, I can say, on agricultural practices and agricultural landscapes. But a lot of agricultural practices are changing as we speak because, of course, there are multiple factors: smaller land holdings, erratic rainfall, climatic conditions, lesser agricultural yield due to a lot of other kind of impacts of pesticides or unforeseen circumstances. There's lesser value to agricultural goods, the export, the kind of economic gains that farmers bring about. It's very challenging. They don't, some of the farmers in really rural areas do not have access to adequate agricultural infrastructure in terms of seed banks or storage facilities or protection kind of help when calamities and diversities happen. Another important aspect is industrialization and urbanization, setting up of industries in rural landscapes. You have these SIR, social economic zones, special investment regions cropping up in rural landscapes closer to natural resources to capitalize on those natural resources, and that is going to affect the kind of livelihood and the occupation that the indigenous communities have over there. Tourism is a very important factor, that is affecting the rural landscapes, the natural landscapes in terms of our eco-sensitive areas or ecological significant areas in terms of biodiversity. And a lot of it is because there's lack of integrated planning at a regional scale. Villages are not planned per se. They're just amalgamated or absorbed into urban areas as outgrowth areas. And urban areas, when planned, do not factor in the regional drivers and forces. So in that case, cities become a pull factor and villages become a push factor, and migration is one of the biggest causes of the changes in rural and peri-urban landscapes. The intrinsic factors are social media influences. Most of the rural areas today have access to cell phones. They have access to all the urban gadgets that we talk about, whether it be the television, the air conditioner, a washing machine, and of course the the added or the snowball effect of those kind of lifestyle changes that are caused because of urban influences. Not to say it is bad or wrong, but it is a causative factor, and how we balance it as a society, as policymakers, or as planners, as citizens is important. Access to urban health and educational facilities, personal aspirations. I want to go live in the city, or I want to, I want to get there economically, or I want to get there socially or culturally. I want to be accepted, mainstreamed, into society. Shift in occupation for economic gains. So again, like I said, there are push and pull factors, and the urban lifestyle that has set in the rural areas. So there is increase in vehicle ownership in terms of two-wheelers and cars, not just tractors or the other transportation vehicles, but vehicles for personal transportation. The dependency is increasing because to a certain extent the affordability is there thanks to all the EMIs that are given by the two-wheeler companies and the car companies, the loans that banks are giving. It's a good thing, but the effective usage of it or application of it needs to be questioned at some point in time. So because of all these kind of advances, but the system does not keep up or cannot keep up with the kind of lifestyle changes from rural to urban, and the rural locations also have urbanized their lifestyle, so they are producing equal or equivalent amount of solid waste in terms of plastic, in terms of single-use disposable waste, thermocol, use and throw kind of cutlery, and rampant use of non-biodegradable items either in their ravines or in their rivers, ponds, all along the roadways. So yes, we do focus, our policies do focus on effective connectivity. Our roads are built, we have concrete roads, we have wonderful tarred roads, we have access to vehicle usage. But then on the downside, we do not factor in, or we do not provide the infrastructure to deal with the kind of water usage or the water consumption even at rural areas is increasing thanks to the urban lifestyle that we've adopted, and the the polluting agents and the pollution receivers in terms of lakes, rivers, oceans, in terms of coastal areas or even wetlands. Therefore, with the increasing kind of the impetus that is there, there's been an increasing amount of research and interest in now, trying to compare between standard of living and quality of life. Initially, and a lot of it right now at grassroots level also, a lot of people, a lot of households focus on standard of living um, as a societal acceptance kind of a benchmark. But at the end of the day, once you've been through that cycle of urban living and living in cities that are congested with pollution, then the focus goes on to quality of life, and quality of life parameters is gaining a lot of importance and relevance in today's time, because the urban way of living is giving rise to a lot of security, health, mental health, physical health concerns. I'm not getting into spiritual health right now because then that gets into a whole different tangent. So, but mental, emotional, and physical health is one of the major upcoming focus of an outcome of urban living. So people are looking at meaningful life. People are looking at quality of life. People are also trying to get into cost of living kind of equations, urban versus rural, or what is it that we want to, how do we pay, whether we live in cities or peri-urban areas or rural areas, and we commute or we take up, a job elsewhere. Thanks to COVID, we've had this kind of work from home opportunity or luxury, and people are now looking at whether they want to live in cities, and they are doing their cost benefit analysis. But these are important factors or aspects that are that are now hitting society today, and people are being forced, or they want to think about it differently, but that's a fraction of society. So having said that, it's a vicious cycle, no? Migration, people move from rural to peri-urban areas and peri-urban to urban areas. But the urban people are understanding or realizing the values of the natural, or they're missing that natural element in their life and in their lifestyle, and they want to get back. So, they are getting into urban farming, urban forestry. They are getting into on an individual level or at a community or a collective level, they are getting into this whole going back to nature kind of a journey, trying to unlearn and relearn sort of a thing, or they're trying to undo the damage in their own ways to themselves or to their families. But this kind of realization takes a toll on the entire environment, the entire ecosystem, the entire landscape. And that percentage is still very less. And hopefully, if the decision makers in terms of politicians, in terms of the bureaucrats, in terms of the state, or whoever, the legislators, if they can leapfrog this kind of issues and take corrective measures, and bring it, mainstream them into their processes, institutionalize these kind of approaches faster before it is too late, then we still have a chance to balance, to salvage the situation. Otherwise we're headed for disaster. So these are a few things as citizens, as experts, as academia, as professionals take up. Some initiatives are already going on. Some initiatives have been taken in the city of Vadodara. Pune is doing a lot. Bangalore is doing quite a lot. The citizens of Bangalore. So grassroots level initiatives do play an important role. But from personal experience, I feel that they are important. It is important to engage with the authorities, but that engagement has to be effective. And how to do that is a trial and error outcome, and one has to be persistent to do that. Now, to keep that kind of momentum in society, amongst civic society, is a little difficult. It is challenging, but not impossible. So if we, if we have to, I mean, I would not say salvage the environment. If we have to salvage ourselves, because environment and nature will take care of itself. If we need to salvage ourselves, then we need to take a lot of corrective actions soon at an individual and collective level. And of course, we ourselves then need to define what is development and what is urban. How much urban do we want to become? How much rural do we want to keep to ourselves? So with that, I feel that sustainable development is an oxymoron in the current situation. Um, Balancing is there, but if you're going to talk of development in its current form and current definition or intent, or the pace at which we are getting towards, into destructive activities, then sustainability is not possible. And we'll have to figure out for ourselves how much we want to uh, compromise in the way we live ourselves, in the way we conduct ourselves, and in the quality of life that we want to achieve at the end of the day. So with this, I'd like to, open it up to questions and dialogue. Can I stop sharing?
Yes, ma'am. And thank you so much for a wonderful, webinar. It was really striking with the chord and giving the new mindsets. So as you have already said, the now forum is already open for question and answers. If you have any questions you want to give, or your point of view, as ma'am has already said that it should be a dialogue, it should not be one way. You are open. I mean, it is open to ask. Please raise your hand and you can ask one by one. Yes, Reshma, you can unmute and ask.
Hello, ma'am. Uh, During my field work, I observed solid waste dumping, sewage waste, cattle bathing, washing clothes directly in the wetland. So, what low cost and community based strategies can be adopted to prevent such pollution?
Okay. This is a very common phenomena that is occurring in today's villages, if you're talking about rural areas. So I think that every society or every ecosystem is unique, and the people who are using that, if how connected they are to their physical environment, the natural and the built environment, and if the people, it's also the attitude of the people. If the attitude is such that we will live our life and we will conduct our lifestyle, and the authorities will have to come and clean up after us, then that's a myth. It's a misconception. So there are a lot of initiatives where you make the polluters aware. There is this whole principle of polluters pay. So you have to make the polluters aware, make them, educate them, and segregate at source as much as you can. Compost, do not mix your dry and wet waste. Try and talk to your local elected people to see how you can transport or transfer the waste to a management facility. At the end of the day, one also has to understand what kind of waste it is and what is the purpose or the source of generation. Whether it is by choice or it is by compulsion. In the sense, sometimes you have to use what you have to use. Example, plastic water bottles. If you're going to carry a bottle of water, you are going to be very sensitive and carry a bottle of water. You may not want to buy a bottle of water, but that kind of waste, that is one kind of waste that can be avoided, that can be, refused to create that kind of waste. But there are, you can, of course, there's a lot of things out there. You can set up bins, you can set up awareness posters, do not, dump here, or there's a potential to collect your waste here. This also is an opportunity for a whole small scale industry at rural areas. A lot of people can set up their own small businesses. We used to have, growing up, and even now in urban areas, we have pastiwalas, and we have, people who collect and recycle waste. But in rural areas, that is still not there. Maybe it's a taboo, or it's a mindset issue ki, oh, kabadi wala is not a lucrative or an acceptable profession. But I think waste management is going to be the next most lucrative economic activity in rural areas as well. So Reshma, there's a lot of things that can be done, right from awareness, that is the kind of soft advocacy, intangibles that are there, and there are tangible ways to engage the elected officials, to engage the authorities, rural development authorities, or the corporations or the municipalities, and be at it, persistently be at it to target this issue.
Thank you, ma'am.
I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Kamalesh has a question. Please go ahead.
Good evening, ma'am. My name is Kamalesh. I have asked the question about ecological restorations in the sociological aspect. Is nowadays the many institutions and conferences based on this topic. Is nowadays is possible. What about this topic, ma'am?
Ecological restoration?
Socio-cultural related, ma'am. Ecological restoration is related to socio-cultural aspect.
Oh yes, it is. Because I think every ecosystem is unique in itself. It depends on your climatic location, your geographical location, even your where you are, whether it's a terrain-based ecosystem, whether hilly areas, mountain areas, forest ecosystem, riverine ecosystem, coastal ecosystem. So all these ecosystems will have a very unique socio-cultural community. The dominating socio-cultural aspects are very unique in each of these ecosystems. So if you go in the mountains, the people have a particular discipline amongst themselves versus when you're on the plains. So when we talk of ecological restoration is a very prescriptive kind of a activity. And then you need to also, there is something called indigenous knowledge, which you are referring to as socio-cultural systems. So every indigenous knowledge base will have its own answers to the degraded ecosystems in that particular location, in that particular ecosystem, whether it is fragile or whether it is robust. And to identify those kind of knowledge base, people who have acquired that knowledge through practice over years and across generations, because a lot of this knowledge is acquired through generational practice. Whether you are a tribal person living, you have acquired that kind of knowledge from your forefathers through practice. And that knowledge, unfortunately, is not mainstreamed, or it is not acknowledged in, by the so-called system that we have today, whether it's the educational system or whatever it is. So one needs to then acknowledge and appreciate that knowledge base, indigenous knowledge base, the local socio-cultural practices that have been carried forward or have been carried on since centuries, understand why they have been or why those practices are the way they are and what are the impacts of it. One will have to get into the scientific understanding also. There's a lot of superstition associated with these kind of practices, and that is why a lot of these socio-cultural indigenous practices are not given the same level of respect that the modern day science practices are given. I'll give a small example. Take yoga, for example. Culturally, we've been practicing yoga since centuries, since millennia, but it was never scientifically proven, through any experiment until recent years. That's thanks to the Western science that we've so blindly adopted. Not that it's wrong, but in that process, in that bargain, we should not forget, or we should not um, minimalize our indigenous knowledge systems as well. So one has to be very conscious as to how much to take from which source. And I think we should not take anything blindly, top-down efforts. Because Western science says this, it is not applicable to our context, or because they have said it, some other communities or other ecosystems are practicing it, we should do the same. No, it's not going to be possible. And that's not the right way to do. One will have to find localized answers for localized problems.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kamlesh. Next, Pranandaman, if I'm not wrong. Sir, you can please go ahead.
Yeah, hi.
If you have a question. Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Miss
Hi.
Neha. I wanted to ask this question about like जो shift हम बात कर रहे थे between rural to urban, peri-urban to urban, and then back again to rural. So this shift is quite inevitable unless there's a change of mindset. That is what I feel. But
True.
also, like, yeah, please tell me. This feels very can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So this shift is quite inevitable in the sense of, I mean, they will want a better life anyway, so that kind of a thing. But if we are looking at rural and I'm sorry, 1 second. Yeah, so this shift in mindset is only like through awareness and like if there are systems that are put in place, like a segregation of dry waste and wet waste. I have been to urban places that are there in outside my hometown. In my hometown, it's a smaller place, but then they do segregate and all that. But I come out and even in urban areas, हम segregate करके देंगे even if we do the segregation firstly in our house. Once the waste goes to the public place, they mix it up anyway. So
Correct.
would only like if we can streamline the monitoring, is that the only way we can make sure that any intention that we post or any policy is actually being followed properly? Or is it only through finding people that we can make sure that this kind of a change will actually be more popular?
Yeah, that's a very valid point. And, because solid waste management is a systemic process. So you have a source to end. At source, people say that, no, we've segregated, but, by the time it gets into the processing unit or the landfill, it's all mixed. So as a creator of waste, you can segregate and give, but then the entire process, there's a chain link that's associated. There's a chain of events. So this entire process has to be streamlined across the chain. So as citizens, we'll have to keep pushing for that, make the authorities accountable, push them to do their job in a better way. That's the only thing we can do as citizens, because we don't have any position of power. We do not work in corporations, or people who work in corporations should take this up more seriously to see how they can streamline this entire solid waste process. In the meantime, as citizens, what we can do is, try and reuse and recycle the waste as much possible at our end itself. So if you're going to compost the wet waste at your individual homes, where it is possible in urban areas, I compost my own waste at home. So that way you're reducing the amount of waste that is going into the main channel, the waste management system. Another thing is, how do you also reuse a lot of, that's a lifestyle thing. It's a very conscious effort of how you streamline your disciplined lifestyle not to generate waste to begin with. That is one thing at an individual level. But yes, down the whole chain of solid waste management, it is the authorities that need to also step up their game and take this whole system forward, set the whole system straight. They do need to have a solid waste treatment plant. They need to have CND waste plants in their urban areas at least. But those kind of systems are not viable or possible in rural areas, but that need a lot of focus now, because even rural areas, the amount of CND waste that is generated in rural areas is quite considerable. It's not just the urban areas that are creating construction and demolition waste. It's also the rural areas. They also undergo a lot of renovations. They have a lot of waste that is generated. Cement usage, sand usage has increased phenomenally even in the rural areas. So it is not just municipal solid waste in the term of domestic solid waste, but it's also CND waste that needs to be streamlined, that needs to be channelized. And the authorities should take that up and set their system in place. And if not, then they should be held accountable by civic society.
Yeah, so this accountability comes through monitoring. I mean, that is the only factor that changes their decisions or helps improve the decisions. Would that only be monitoring? There be more ways that this can be
it is not.
achieved?
Yes, monitoring is one. Continuous dialogue with the authorities is very important.
Finding them, monetary implications, I meant.
Monetary, yes. Yeah, monetary fines do help, but in my experience, monetary fines have not done any good to stop the pollution, even against authorities. So the pollution control boards collect a lot of fines from corporations, from municipalities, from authorities, but it's all on paper. Nothing happens or nothing translates on ground. So my advice and my suggestion is to have constant dialogue with the authorities and the elected representatives of the community.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Naheli, you can ask.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Heli Ozwala from Vadodara. I would like to ask a question on the slide you talked about standard of living versus quality of life. Can we classify urban and rural area people's mindset in any of them, like specific mindset any urban and rural people have, and if yes, then which we should adapt? And is there any right or wrong, or there is another way out?
That's a good question. According to me, there is no right or wrong. The right or wrong, every individual has to decide for themselves what is right or what is wrong for them. But yes, standard of living society has this whole status symbol kind of a mindset, and that's a very collective social. It's called social conditioning. And there is also the concept called manufactured consent, where you have so much media publicity that you need this. I'll give you a small example of these fairness creams. That is manufactured consent kind of a thing. So if you have a lot of these advertisements that keep coming that you need to have fair skin, fair skin, fair skin, so a person who has a darker skin will automatically start feeling intimidated, and the person will want to will start believing that I need to become fair. So when we talk of, and that has a lot to do with policies, it is very closely related with policies. The way our policies are set up, where our policies say that, you need to have these kind of facilities, the smart village, smart city. So all that creates an impact on society, and they go through an entire conditioning process. So then we fall into the trap of standard of living. So when, for example, I'll give you my own personal experience. When I moved to Baroda, I'm not originally from Baroda, but when I moved to Baroda, I was told, okay, now you'll have to learn to drive a two-wheeler. So I went and bought a cycle and I became the laughing stock of my society. Because a person who cycles is, becomes part of the have-nots. So if you have to stay in society, you have to drive. That is the general perception. So a lot of this is social conditioning. Once you get into that, fall into that whole rat race of, standard of living, and once you go through that cycle, do some people realize that, it is the quality of life that matters? So there are countries like Bhutan, for example, their policies focus on quality of life principles. They do not focus on standard of living kind of, principles. So some of it is individual, but a lot of it is collective. And unfortunately, we do not dialogue with each other, to actually figure out, that starts with questions, in a classroom, for example. When the teacher asks you any questions, the student will say, अगर मैं पूछूंगी तो people will laugh at me. लोग क्या सोचेंगे मेरे बारे में कि मुझे इतना भी नहीं आता. तो उस डर के मारे हम पूछते नहीं है और हम dialogue नहीं करते. Correct? So that is the first step, that we need to break our inhibitions and dialogue and discuss. So when these things, then there is a collective realization, oh, this is not what we want, or this is not the direction that we want to go to, Then communities come together and they work and take corrective actions. So it's an iterative process, it's a bottom-up process and a top-down approach simultaneously.
Because ma'am, what I have seen personally, that generally in rural area, people tend to think that this is the standard of living we need to achieve, that because of all the social media, TV, and all the other platforms. And as you said in the cycle, that urban area, then peri-urban area, and rural area. And urban area people, rural area wants to become a part of peri-urban, and peri-urban wants to become a part of rural area, and urban area, and urban area then again go to rural area and peri-urban area. So according to my opinion, this is what I think, that in urban area, people more think about quality of life. For example, they fantasize about being in a natural environment, in between the trees, between the animals. So I think the urban people more think about quality of living, and rural people fantasize about the standard of living, what they can achieve. So yeah, this is what I think. So if correct me if I am wrong.
No, you're right, and that is why I put in one of my slides, no, grass is always greener on the other side. Because what I have, I feel that the other person or the other end of society is better than what I am at. So the urban people, because they have gone through the entire trauma, of, say, suppose 2 hours of commute, the stressful driving, the honking, the pollution, and all of that, they want to get, and that is why tourism is a very big industry now, specifically ecotourism. But because of the lack of policy or design or whatever you call it, it is the urban people who go and pollute the natural environment. The very reason why they go to the nature, they want to convert it, because once they go there, they also want a conditioner. They want to create a lot of solid waste over there. They don't want to leave their urban lifestyle behind. So if you look at all your tourism places, whether it is ecotourism, whether it is religious tourism, whether it is economic tourism, health tourism, whatever tourism facilities you go and you visit, it is only degrading the quality of the ecosystem in that area, because the urban people don't want to leave their urban mindset behind. They want the benefits of nature, but they don't. So part of it is also the authorities and the system. The governance system also has to, decide how much to allow and how much to permit and where to stop it. And that is why I call it a vicious cycle. So somewhere some line has to be drawn.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anyone want to ask anything else? Yes, Azlan.
Hi, ma'am. My name is Azlan, and first of all, I would like to thank you for such an insightful PPT and lecture. Ma'am, my question is, why do rural areas often face slower adoption of sustainable practice compared to that of urban centers, despite there is resilience more prominently on the natural resources?
No, why, can you repeat your first sentence? Why do rural areas face more?
Why do rural areas often face slower adoption of sustainable practice compared to that of urban centers, despite like their resilience are more prominently on the natural resources?
True. So, like we just discussed, no, it's that whole want to be there. I want to be urban, and because of the manufactured consent and access to social media and the emphasis on urban, the rural the rural areas don't have that kind of confidence in themselves that they can do it, or their practices or their traditional or indigenous practices are valid, and they want to adapt to urban practices in their rural setting, and that is where the dissonance occurs. So rural areas have access to better natural resources, they are more resilient in nature, but it is the attitude which plays a very important role, and the attitude sets the direction of any action, individual or collective. So that attitude and the principles that one, and the confidence that one has, so one has to think through what is being fed to them. That thinking mindset has, I think our education system is also to blame, because our whole education system is so standardized, that K to 12 system, that we've just stopped producing thinkers, or we have, our system is uh, training us not to think. It is only training us to follow and to be slaves of the system, but not to think and not to challenge. We're not we've been told not to question or challenge the system or the practices that are there. And I think that one of the previous person asked socio-cultural kind of resilience. This has a lot to do with that also. So that cultural unity or the cultural belief or practices will give that sense of confidence. And that is why in one of my slides I've said that we are increasing our homogeneity in society, and we're reducing our diversity. The moment you reduce diversity, then there is a problem.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Any more questions? If not, with your permission, I would like to ask one question. Ma'am,
Sure,
thank
sure.
you so much for such an insightful presentation. Definitely it was, and it clicked on many level. But my question to you over here is that, especially when you talked about that urbanization is equivalent to development, and development is equivalent to constructions. If you look at to any of the agenda or any of the portfolio of our whatever the leading political parties are, they always quote urbanization or any kind of a development. You talk about Ayodhya recently after Ram Mandir. You talk about UP, the way UP has emerged, even including after removing Article 370, including the Kashmir has emerged, especially in the terms of ecotourism. The people over there are very happy. If you talk about recent the Belgaum attack, they were forcing that we should go and the tourism shall continue over there, because the local over there, it gives them job, it gives them some kind of a livelihood. And with India becoming fourth in the world economy, and Modi ji telling like by 2037 we will be in the on the top, how you see that this development especially coming from the big political parties, with the pressure of becoming global economy, along with creation of this sustainable development or the jobs, how we can care about the environment. Because as someone has already said, it is, and as you also said, that it is the dream of people who are living in the rural area to live and experience that urban life. After experiencing that urban life, they want to go to the same from their roots where they have started. But when it comes to this kind of talks, especially as well as the urban development or the constructions, they want it. So how we can stop them? Because honestly, they will come, oh, you have already experienced, now you're giving us this thing. No matter how much I tell them, this is the best or all those things, because somehow the economical benefit is there in all this construction and the development or the livelihood creations. Unless until we reach up to the America, where we are just consumer, we are just giving everything outside and we are not building anything. So how, as an Indian economy, where we are convincing people or telling people to become one of the world top economy by 2037, how we shall see environment and this development? Because we should not see development in a negative way only. It gives certain standard, it gives certain lifestyle, it open up some forms, it open up some channels which were never experienced by any of us. So how these two can be taken one into one hand, especially with the new generation coming up, because this is not the topic which is started coming now. We have been sensitized, like from grade one, our kids are getting sensitized, but still there's a whole lag is there. So how you see, as an individual level, we can participate in that thing?
So it's a very good question and a good point, and that that there is no right or wrong answer to this. It is how one, where does one find a kind of a balance zone, and at an individual level and at a collective level as a society also. Like I said, this whole thing is development. It gives us certain benefits like job security. It gives us increased income, but we rarely try to do, we do not, sorry, yeah, we do not do a cost benefit analysis. For example, if I am living in and I give this example to my students in class as well, if I'm an urban resident and I'm making 1 lakh rupees a month, but my expense, cost of living is going to be 95,000, what am I getting at the end of the day? I'm paying doctor's bills, I'm paying medical bills, I'm paying rent, electricity, school fees, blah, blah, blah. And what is it that I'm getting at the end of the day? Versus I'm a farmer in a rural area, and uh, I'm making 20,000 rupees a month, but my expenditure is only 5,000. So, and this is from an economic perspective. I'm sure, this is just for example, I've not done these kind of calculations, but the cost of living, if you actually go to see your bare minimum requirement also, besides your personal aspirations. Yes, if I'm living in a rural area and I want to go to a city to watch a movie in an INOX, then there's a problem. But that INOX, going to a movie in INOX is considered a social kind of a plus point. It's like, because it's been promoted that way. Okay, you have to, reach that kind of level. So it's that, this whole thing is there. Plus, I think this whole economy, we always focus on GDP, but we never look at the expenditure. So, because when you say gross domestic product, I think we should start looking at net domestic product also, and then we'll see where we are actually. If you are going to focus on economy and not focus, not translate our environmental costs, right? There are a lot of ecological economists now who are trying to put a monetary value at the cost of environment, cost of pollution, cost of, so there are people who have carried out those costs. Now, if you look at that cost versus the income or the benefit, the costs are much higher, which are intangibly felt or experienced by the citizens. But because that intangible experience does not have a monetary tag to it, we tend to ignore it or we tend to oversee it. The moment you say that, okay, I cannot drink water from my lake or my river, and I have to, go through the entire purification process, after which I'm still not sure whether the water is healthy, after which I will have to pay bills in the hospital. If I get cancer, what do I do? So those kind of costs, intangible costs, are not identified. People do mention it, but it is difficult to quantify. Not everything can be quantified. So at some point, we'll have to look at the qualitative aspects and not just the quantitative aspects. And right now, everything is based on number crunching. Even when you talk of land values, or when you're talking of, land areas, this much area is required for expansion. I'll give you a small example of Vadodara. When you plan for Vadodara, so much is, so many hectares or so many square kilometers of agricultural peri-urban land is incorporated in city limits. And then you have malls, and you have commercial, and you have, kind of shops and residential development being, come up. That they say will give you employment and will give you jobs. But what is happening to the existing fabric? वो खोखला होते जा रहा है. It's like a donut effect that is happening. उसका cost क्या है? What is the cost of that? Nobody wants to, get into those kind of dialogues. Or how can we, reuse or, retrofit our existing urban fabric to use it at its maximum before we go and incorporate additional land into the urban areas. That cost benefit analysis is something that we need to start doing to be able to answer the larger questions of GDP and the larger questions of individual progress, as we call it. So, and I think that is something that if the authorities are not doing, then as citizens we should take it up, because at the end of the day, we are the ones who vote for our representatives. So if our representatives don't do thinking for us, then we will have to start thinking for ourselves, or force them to think the way we want them to think.
Absolutely right, ma'am. Thank you so much. So anyone else want to ask the question? If not, I would like everyone to please open up your cameras for a group photograph.
Yeah, it's good to see faces, otherwise I feel I'm talking to one periodic table, I see letters floating around.
Absolutely, absolutely, ma'am. I request everyone, please open up your cameras for a group photograph. Other people I am sure you all are having very pretty faces.
The faces don't have to be pretty, it's okay. And pretty also is a definition of how you define pretty, It doesn't have to be the market definition of pretty. Everybody is pretty.
True. All right, if ready, then I'll take a screenshot. All right, have a smile. Many people joined us today, ma'am, from across all over India.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And now I request Dr. Jendra Lakmapurkar, our director, to please give word of thanks.
Urban-rural dilemma is a big topic. When you are in the rural area, living in having good wind, a traditional house, you don't need electricity. Once you become urban, it's a urban heat island that hits you and you start consuming more power. So it's called development. So that the electricity consumption is increased, and so how we are getting developed. Similarly, water, in rural area, you take bath in pond Water is not counted, but now in urban area, water supply is there. So how much water is consumed, and against that, how much waste is produced. So that is also measured out. This much infrastructure has come up, and so the area got developed. So there are so many such things which quantify that yes, urban area is more developed compared to the. But what we are losing while urbanization is never counted, as Dr. Neha said. Second thing, as far as our education system is concerned, farmers are not educated that much. They are doing with their traditional practice, but the person who is taught agriculture, is graduate in agriculture, is doing job. So this is how it is funny. Anyway, so this is a very thought-provoking presentation or lecture, what I have said, and I hope it will help so many participants to have give their future thinking, change their future thinking as far as urban and rural is concerned. We have to develop, but the direction should be decided whether it's urbanization purely is a development or not. And if we develop as an urban area, what should be the priority? How much we are losing through losing rural area, and how we can sustain that rural area with our existing urban area, planning such a way that we don't consume more rural area. So that should be, I think, priority. Otherwise, we'll keep on expanding, and we keep on losing so many excellent resources like biodiversity, pure water, and so many things. So I think this was a very good presentation. Thank you, Dr. Neha. Thank you all participants who listen it very intentively and asking those questions so that other also got enlightened with it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for asking questions.
Thank you, everyone. And before we leave, I would like to share one thing, that how you can get associated with Gujarat Ecology Society. Just allow me 1 minute. Okay. I'm sure you can see the slide. So we have launched our newsletter, monthly newsletter, that is called as Harit Patra. You can subscribe to our newsletter. In the newsletter, you will get all the updates about what the kind of work we do, how you can get associated with us, and in the near future, whatever the vacancies are there and whatever upcoming webinars are there. So definitely, as you already registered for our webinar, so you are there as a part of GES community. You will be getting all the notifications for the upcoming webinar. But I would also request you to please subscribe to our newsletter. So Haley, that answers your question, that how you can get associated with Gujarat Ecological Society. And any other question? Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Haley. And with that, we officially close the webinar. As Dr. Neha has already said and Dr. Lakma Purkar has already said, the recordings of this will be available on our YouTube channel. You can rewatch it. You can again learn it. Ma'am, can you also share your email ID so that if people want to connect to you, they can connect and ask directly to you?
Sure, you want me to put it on the chat? I can put it on the chat.
Yes, you can put in the chat or also on the screen, whatever it is convenient for you.
My email is there with GES, but I'll just put it over here as well for people to.
So you can note down the email of Neha ma'am. You can get guidance, you can ask a question, career advice, or any other challenges you are facing, especially into the local areas or your localities, how you want to conserve the environment, and go ahead.
Happy to engage and happy to contribute in any way I can.
Yeah. Yes. And Catherine is saying thank you so much for this wonderful session, ma'am. So a lot of our love is pouring into the chats for you.
Thank you.
So with that, I request everyone, you can leave the webinar as it is closed. Meenakshi is saying thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Priya is saying thank you so much, ma'am.
Actually, I was asked to talk 1 hour, but I realized if the audience is young, then their focus capacity is not more than 30-35 minutes. So I tried to keep it at that.
So it was very good, ma'am, especially with respect to the mindset, because that really hit, very hard.
Because I teach students, no, of like post-grad, undergrad age. So after half an hour, they'll say, "Ma'am, break chahiye." So then I know the mindset. I mean, the capacity is only 35, max 40 minutes.